Hello and welcome to the Flipside. And I am your host, Dr. Michael Nichols. This is another episode where we talk about science, health, and the politics that surround health and science. So today, I hope I've got an interesting topic for you today. I'm going to attempt to do something that is very common and very known, I think, for a lot of people, but I'm going to try and do it from a little bit of a different perspective. Now, before we get into that topic, and I start describing that for you, just a little bit of a review from last week, or kind of a catch up, so that everybody knows. This episode, of course, comes out on Mondays, and I think it's Tuesday or it's Wednesday. I'm forgetting. It's Tuesday or Wednesday of this week for this episode will be the full Senate vote for RFK Jr. So everybody put that energy out there. We really want this to transpire. We want this to happen. We want him to be in charge of that organization, because this is how we're going to get major change to occur when it comes to the health of our children and the health of this nation. So put that energy out there, because it's so incredibly important. All right. So what is this mystery topic? What is this topic that is very common and very known? And that's exercise. I'm sure for a lot of people who may be watching, the topic of exercise may seem like a tired topic, something that we've done so many times, that what are you going to talk about with exercise that we don't know about? Well, maybe nothing. I'll put that out there right off the bat. Maybe nothing. Maybe there's nothing that I'm going to talk about that is new for you. I don't know. But what I thought I would do for this episode is attempt to discuss the subject of exercise from an angle that might be a little bit different than many people have heard it discussed as. So before I give you the angle, let me give you a little bit of background. Excuse me. Those of you who have been watching all of the episodes thus far, or those who may actually know me or know about me, I am a chiropractor. I've been practicing chiropractic for over 20 years. Along with that, I've been practicing functional medicine, nutrition for the same amount of time or longer. But what you may not know in that background is that before I became a chiropractor, I was a personal trainer and a massage therapist, but a personal trainer for 14 years. So when it comes to the subject of exercise, I feel like I've got a good background for that. I worked in gyms in California. I worked in gyms in Texas, and numerous gyms, managed certain of those gyms, and worked as a personal trainer in a lot of those gyms. So a long history of working with people with exercise, with all sorts of goals: weight loss, muscle gain, etc. So a good background with that. The other thing that you may not know is that I've also been a teacher for over 20 years. When I first got out of chiropractic college, chiropractic college is excellent. It teaches you everything you need to know to be a good chiropractor, but it doesn't teach you anything about business. I'm sure the schools would say, wait a minute, we teach business. Yeah, but the amount of business is so little compared to what you really need to get out there and get started as a small business owner. So coming out of chiropractic college in 2000, which was when I graduated, it was very stressful, and I needed to find a job before I could get my job started. And one of the things that I did is I actually started teaching. I did not know anything about teaching going into it. I had my knowledge about the body, and that's why they hired me, but I had never taught before. And it ended up being that I loved teaching, loved it. If I had known how much I loved teaching, I might have gone straight into teaching straight out of high school, because I absolutely love teaching. And you may feel some of that in these videos because it may come across in everything that I do. I have taught for chiropractic college. I've taught for several nursing colleges. I've taught for many colleges online. I taught for a massage school for 16 years as their anatomy and physiology instructor. I have taught, I've done tutoring for the past 4 years online. I've done tutoring strictly online, kind of starting in COVID and then continuing through that. So I love teaching students. And my subject for over 20 years has been anatomy and physiology. I have also taught pathophysiology. I've taught medical terminology. I've taught biology. I've taught a variety of other topics as well. But anatomy and physiology has been my bread and butter when it comes to teaching. And when I have always taught anatomy and physiology, and when you teach anatomy and physiology, one of the things you tend to do, I would I'm not going to speak for all teachers who teach this subject, but for the most part, you teach according to the 11 systems. There are 11 organ systems in your body, and we tend to focus on each organ system one at a time and kind of go over each system, like the muscular system, the skeletal system, the cardiovascular system, the endocrine system, etc. When I would do that, one of the things I enjoyed doing with students was trying to put real life ideas, concepts, scenarios into the material to make the material more accessible. And so one of the things that I liked to do when I would talk about various parts of different systems is relate them back to exercise and kind of try to show the student that, look, see this physiological system that we're talking about here, and what we're saying here, this is the reason why we talk about this being important for exercise. We say exercise this way. This is really the reason. And it's not talked about from that perspective, but that's really the reason why we do that. So I thought I might share with you that today, and that is my approach to talking about these systems and relating it back to exercise. So my hope is that you learned something today that you didn't know in regards to the reasons why exercise is so important to our body. And for me, this may not be for anybody else. I'm a total geek when it comes to anatomy and physiology. I am constantly in awe of the human body, of what our bodies can do. And I try to share that with my students, that inspiration. So when I hear these types of things, it motivates me to do the steps necessary and continue exercising. It's not always easy. In fact, it's hard most of the time. Our lives, especially as we get older, our lives get more and more busy. And with that busyness, we put priorities on certain things, and a lot of times it may not be exercise. So maybe, hopefully, what you get out of this is more inspiration or motivation, more understanding that tells you, I really need to get off my tush and start exercising. I need to make this a priority. So that's the hope today. So I hope you will enjoy this journey through the body the way that I'm going to do this today. So where do we start with that? That's a good question. Where do we start with that? The effects of exercise on our physiology, on our anatomy, is innumerable. And there are too many of those to really try to give you all of the different benefits that exercise gives to our bodies. So I'm going to focus on some that I think are a little more glaring, perhaps a little more kind of easy to understand as far as what exercise is doing beneficially to our body. And so I'm going to start with the vascular system, cardiovascular system, but I'm going to start with the vascularity and move from that. So let's talk a little bit about the vascularity. So I'm going to pull up an image here. And go from that. So as usual, you got to give me a moment here to pull something up here. All right, so here you go. So what we have here is an image of vascularity. Now this is obviously just a very graphic representation of something happening in our body, but it'll give us, give you an understanding, I think, of what I'm talking about. So from your heart, so your heart sits pretty much in the middle of your chest here, just a little bit more angled to the left, but right in the middle of your thoracic cage. So right behind your sternum, this bone here, is your heart. Your heart is a muscle, and your heart is a pump. It's a pumping mechanism. And as it pumps, as it contracts, it squeezes blood into arteries. Now you have arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. Those are the blood vessels that are going to circulate blood through our body. And so the blood vessel that comes out of the heart is the aorta. It's the largest, thickest, strongest of the arteries that comes out in your body. And that aorta then comes out and then starts to branch into other types of arteries. Arteries have different types of names. Those then go into smaller branches called arterioles. And then those are going to go into even smaller branches called capillaries, etc. So let's start from that. So over here on the right, we see artery. Artery is the largest. Arteries then go to smaller branches called arterioles. And then as they come down, they go into the smallest of these blood vessels, which is capillaries. Those then go to a little bit larger, coming out of that into a venule, and then that goes to veins. And it's the veins that bring the blood back to the heart. So the arteries are taking blood away from the heart, and then the veins are bringing blood back to the heart. It's the capillaries that are the point for diffusion, basically, exchange of materials into your cells. So our blood is carrying oxygen to the tissues. It's carrying nutrients to the tissues. It's carrying hormones to the tissues sometimes. And it's at the capillary level that stuff is then brought into the tissues. And the waste products are then brought back into the blood to be carried away. And that's carbon dioxide, other waste metabolites, etc., is going into the capillaries and then carried away. So it's at the capillary level that we're feeding the tissues. Now, one of the things that exercise does, one of the many things that exercise does, is exercise helps to bring oxygen to the tissues. That's one of the things it does. Exercise is increasing the amount of oxygen brought to the tissues. Now, before I get into all of that, I want to give you another look at something here. So let's come out of this, share with you another picture of something. So as we come out of those capillaries, we go into the venous system. And I want to show you something about the venous system. All right, so this is an image of a vein. Now, veins architecturally are very different than arteries. They do not have the thick muscle tissue that arteries tend to have. And they have a very unique feature called valves. And that's what we're seeing here and here. This is a closed valve. This is an open valve. I want you to think of your lower limb, okay? So your lower limb, if we go all the way down to the foot and we come up the leg, past the knee to the thigh, to the pelvis, to the heart, the blood from that lower limb, from all the way down at your toes, is going to need to come all the way up that lower limb to your heart. And it has to fight against gravity. It has to fight against gravity to get to your heart. And so one of the features that helps that blood move towards your heart are these valves. And like I said, this is open, this is closed. Notice the arrow is going up. So if we said the feet were down here and the heart was up here somewhere, we're trying to get that blood up against gravity to the heart. But wait a minute, you say, what about blood pressure? Isn't blood pressure what drives the blood from the heart back to the heart? Isn't it blood pressure? No, it's not. It's blood pressure that drives the blood away from the heart to the capillaries. But after the capillaries, the amount of blood pressure that's actually present is incredibly low. In fact, by the time the blood gets back to the heart, it's pretty much at zero. So we go from that left side of the heart going out arteries to the body. Blood pressure is at about 120 millimeters mercury. But by the time it gets back to the heart through the veins, it's almost at zero. And so blood pressure in the venous system, in the veins, is very, very low to almost non-existent. And so our body doesn't have pressure to drive that blood back to the heart. So there's other mechanisms that do that. And that's the point that I want to get to. So the first one, let's look at that as the valves. The blood is pushed up through the valves. Now remember, it's going against gravity and there's not really a lot of pressure behind it. So as this blood is pushed up through these valves, we'll talk about what's pushing it here in just a minute. There is the tendency for it to want to come back down because gravity is pulling it back down. And these valves act like the rungs of a ladder. So if you went up a couple of rungs and stopped, and if you looked down, those rungs were taken away and you couldn't go back down any further. And then you went up a couple of more and you looked back down and those rungs had been removed again. You couldn't go back down any further. Think about it kind of like that. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You're constantly moving forward and maybe a little bit of backwardness, but you can't go back much further. That's what the valves are keeping the blood from doing. They're keeping the blood from going all the way back down to the feet. So let's talk about what drives that. What is it that is actually creating that pressure? Since we don't have the blood pressure coming from the heart, what is the pressure that's driving this experience? All right, so this image here is, of course, of a person's leg. Here's the foot, the ankle, here's the knee, and this would be the calf muscles, okay, in the back of the leg. And we're showing a vein kind of going between muscles as the blood is being pushed towards the heart. So this is a representation of what's known as the skeletal muscle pump. The skeletal muscle pump. Like I said, the blood pressure from the heart is pretty much non-existent. So coming out of the heart, you don't have a lot of pressure to drive. You have a lot of pressure coming out of the heart, excuse me, but past the capillaries going into the venous system, there's very, very little pressure to drive the flow of blood. So imagine taking a hose and squeezing it and the water pushing out of the hose. That's what the skeletal muscle pump does. As the muscles in our legs and our thighs squeeze, so all these muscles in our lower limb, as they contract, they squeeze on these veins and push the blood upwards towards the heart. And those valves open as the blood is pushed towards the heart when the muscles contract. And when the muscles stop contracting and that pressure goes away, the blood starts to come back down. The valves close and prevent the blood from going all the way back down. And then when the muscles contract again, they go back up again. So imagine yourself on that ladder. There's a push for you to go up. You go up several rungs. That push stops. You go down a couple of rungs, but you can't go down any further. That push happens again. You go up several rungs, and then same thing. And so that's what's happening with the blood. It's going up, 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 being squeezed and pushed by the skeletal muscle pump to get it all the way back to the heart. Now I'm going to come full circle here in just a minute, but I want to add one more thing to this. And that's another mechanism here that we have to discuss for this. And that's this one here. Now this, I'll increase this one up again. This one is the respiratory pump. So you got two pumping mechanisms. You got the skeletal muscle pump, which is occurring primarily in the legs, the lower limbs. It occurs in other areas too, upper limbs too, but not to the degree or to the importance that the lower limb is occurring. And you have the respiratory pump. So notice this line that I'm tracing here. This is the diaphragm. And notice the shape of it here on the left, breathing in. And then look, breathing out, the shape, once again, of the diaphragm. When you breathe in, the diaphragm pulls down, expanding the space within the cavity here of the thoracic cavity. And when you breathe out, it comes back up, lowering that space. So as the diaphragm pushes up, notice how much smaller this space gets. It's pushing air out. When the diaphragm goes down, it gets bigger. That's drawing air in. This in and out of the diaphragm creates a pumping mechanism. So imagine a pump. You're doing a pump, and the pump is like this: pump, 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 pump. The diaphragm is doing that. So as you're breathing in and out, it's creating this pump. That pump is changing pressure from low to high. And that pumping mechanism is drawing the blood up the venous system towards the heart. So you've got the skeletal muscle pump squeezing and pushing it up, and you've got the respiratory pump squeezing and with pressure pulling it up. So between the skeletal muscle pump and the respiratory pump, you're getting the blood back to the heart. Now, everything that I've described there is a basic mechanism. Sitting right here in this chair, my respiratory pump is helping pull blood back to my heart. If I squeeze my calves in my legs, which I'm doing right now, that is squeezing blood back to the heart. So just in a relaxed seated position, this is still occurring in my system. But now think about what happens in exercise. So here we're coming back full circle. In exercise, if I'm, let's say, running on the treadmill, okay, or walking fast on the treadmill, now all of the muscles of my lower limb are contracting to bend my knees, bend my ankles, to move my hips. All those muscles are contracting, okay? And as I exercise, my respiratory rate is going to start to go up. So instead of it being at 12 to 15 breaths per minute, it's going to start to go up. And my respiratory rate's going to go up, 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 up. And as that goes up, that pumping mechanism is increasing. So exercise increases our skeletal muscle pump, and it increases our respiratory pump. And the longer we do that, the harder we do that, the more that's increasing. So by exercising, you are increasing your skeletal muscle pump and your respiratory pump. Therefore, you are increasing the circulation of blood through your system. Okay. And that's one of the huge benefits of exercise. One of the biggest benefits of exercise. In fact, let's go back just for a second and let's make a comment. Why do we exercise? Well, there's lots of reasons to exercise, right? The primary motivator for most people, and I'm saying this without some kind of a statistical fact, but I'm assuming that the primary reason for most people is because they want to look good. It's not even necessarily about health for many, many, many people. It's about, I want to look good. You know, I want to look good in my bathing suit. I want to look good for my significant other. I want to look good when I look in the mirror for my own self-confidence. Okay. It's all about how you look. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. It's good to look good. It's good to look good for yourself. It's good to look good for your significant other. I have no problem with that. But the reality is really that we all need to be exercising, not based on how we look. We need to be exercising based on the health-giving properties that it gives us. If we want to live not only longer lives, okay, because I will tell you, living longer is not where it's at. It's living better. If I live to 110, but the last 20 years of my life are hooked to a machine, pumped full of drugs, feeling miserable, in a very sad, sorry state of affairs, why would you want to live to 110 at that point? If I lived to 80, 85, but I lived those years in top condition, feeling great, and suddenly died, I would prefer that than living to 110 and not having a quality of life. Now, that's my opinion, my choice. I don't know what yours would be, but it's more about quality of life. It's about the quality in that life, not the longevity of it. The thing is that typically goes together. If you have really high quality health, then you're going to live longer typically. Okay. And so as opposed to living longer, how about we just say living healthier, living better? Okay. And that's what exercise helps provide for us. It helps provide us the tools in our body that create those changes, cellular changes, muscular changes, et cetera, that allow us to live a much better, much stronger life. Now, also admitting right up front, there's lots of things that we would need to talk about to create the ultimate model, the ultimate idea of all the things we have to do to create health, right? But right now we're just looking microscopically at one little piece, and that's just exercise and how it influences health in our body. So looking at it for health benefit, exercise is going to increase your skeletal muscle pump. It's going to increase your respiratory pump, and therefore it's going to increase the flow of blood through your system. And that means it's also increasing the flow of oxygen into your tissues. Oxygenation of tissues is radically important for health. This is why we have people have hyperbaric chambers for doing oxygenation of tissues, those types of things. There's all sorts of different types of oxygen therapies. I don't know if anybody remembers, but 20 years ago or whatever, oxygen bars were the big thing. Do you remember that? Oxygen bars. I remember going to an oxygen bar in Colorado in the Denver area. If you take the tram up Pikes Peak to the very top of Pikes Peak, they had an oxygen bar at the top of Pikes Peak where you could sit there at the bar and put flavored oxygen on to revitalize yourself. Because when you go up to the very top of Pikes Peak, the amount of oxygen you're getting is very low. But they had oxygen bars all over the place. It was a very big thing. I don't think there's that many of them around anymore, if there's any. But the idea being that for health, oxygenation of your tissues is incredibly important. Incredibly important. So increasing blood circulation through exercise, through those pumping mechanisms that I just described, is increasing oxygenation of tissues. And in return, of course, oxygen going into the tissues, waste products being pulled out. So we've got good products going in, nutrients, oxygen, and waste products being pulled out. And that's helping your cells be more vital, right? So that idea of exercise for just the pumping mechanisms alone, just for that circulatory thing, if I stopped right there in my explanations, that alone would be cause enough for people to hopefully get motivated enough to do some type of exercise. And at the end of our conversation here, the last part of it's going to be, so then what does that mean? What should I do as far as exercise? We're going to talk about that. Let me talk about another aspect of the circulatory system, cardiovascular system. Let me rephrase that to talk about importance here. Let me get this picture pulled up here. Excuse me. All right. All right, here we have a picture of the heart, our beautiful, beautiful heart. The heart is, like I said, a muscle. It's a pump. So looking at a heart, of course, it's been cut here. This is the right side of the heart, right atria, right ventricle. This is the left side of the heart, left atria, left ventricle. And this tissue here that I'm outlining here, right here, and all of this, this is what is known as the myocardium. Myocardium. The prefix myo, myo means heart. I'm sorry, means muscle, and cardia means heart. So this means heart muscle. So this is the muscle of the heart right here. And this is the muscle that lines the ventricles, because the ventricles are primarily the pumps. Atria do contract, but it's a very mild contraction just to drop the blood down into the ventricles. It's the ventricles that have to contract much harder and more vigorous to eject the blood upwards. So here's the right ventricle. When it contracts, it's ejecting the blood up through this valve into this vein here. This is actually the pulmonary trunk. And it's ejecting the blood on the right side up through here to go to the lungs. That's so that it can become oxygenated. Okay. In other words, the veins are bringing deoxygenated blood into the right side of the heart. It's the blood that's already been used by our body. And then that right side of the heart is going to pump it to the lungs so that it can get filled back up with oxygen. And then it's going to come back to the left side. So notice these two pulmonary veins here and these two over here. Those are going to connect right here to the left atria, and then it's going to drop it down into the left ventricle. And when this guy contracts, it's going to go up right through here and into the aorta. So right side contracts, pushes it to the lungs. The lungs will then bring that blood back to the left side, which when it contracts, it pushes it out through the aorta to the rest of the body. So think about the amount of contractile energy the right side of the heart has to do versus the left side. Right side of the heart doesn't have to contract that hard because it's only going from here to the lungs. It's going boop, just like that. It contracts and it goes just like that to the lungs, and then it brings it back to the heart. And then that left side of the heart has to contract to get the blood to the entire body. So the left side contracts much stronger, much more vigorously than the right side, which is why, if you notice the amount of muscle tissue here on the right versus all the way around the left is much thicker. Now, what do we know about muscle and exercise? If you exercise the correct ways, your muscle gets bigger, but not just bigger, it gets stronger, correct? Well, this is a muscle, and it responds to exercise very similarly to your skeletal muscle. So skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, okay? That cardiac muscle responds very similar to the skeletal muscle in the sense that exercise improves its condition, okay? When you exercise, the quality of what's happening with that cardiac muscle tissue improves. The muscle gets a little bit bigger and it gets more efficient. That's the key, is the efficiency. Think about doing lots of different types of cross-training exercises for your skeletal muscle. You may not get a whole lot bigger, but your ability to use those muscles, the quality of those muscles improves dramatically. So your ability to do certain activities more efficiently, stronger, quicker, without fatiguing, that's the stuff that improves. So endurance improves, strength improves, and a little bit of size. Essentially with exercise, that's what's happening with the cardiac muscle tissue. It's improving in efficiency. It's improving in efficiency. Now, one of the things to think about here, excuse me, is something called cardiac output. Cardiac output. So cardiac output is the amount of blood that the heart pumps out in a minute. Okay, so in a minute's worth of time, how much blood is the heart pumping out? That's called cardiac output. And that's an important measurement. It's an important number because it really shows you the efficiency of the heart. Okay, now cardiac output, so bear with me here. Cardiac output is defined as stroke volume times heart rate. That's what creates cardiac output. It's stroke volume times heart rate. So bear with me again. What is stroke volume? Heart rate, easy to know, right? Heart rate is the beats of your heart, okay? Beats of your heart. But what is stroke volume? So stroke volume is the volume of blood pumped from the ventricles with each contraction. So each contraction of your heart, the amount of blood that comes out is called the stroke volume, Okay, so think about each contraction as a stroke, 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 stroke. That is pumping out blood, and the stroke volume times the heart rate is your cardiac output. Okay, very important calculation when it comes to the health of your heart. Now, a normal heart rate, and let me say normal being in quotes, it's more like the average, okay? We use normal and average interchangeably a lot in our dialogues, and it's unfortunate because it gives us the sense that what is really an average is normal, right? So normal blood pressure, normal body temperature, normal heart rate, normal cholesterol levels, those aren't normal. Those are averages, right? So the average heart rate is around 75-ish, okay? Around 75 is the normal heart rate. Now, if you are an athlete, okay, and let's define athlete simply as someone who exercises regularly with a varying degree of intensity, okay? You don't have to be a world-class Olympic athlete. If you are someone who exercises on a regular basis with varying degrees of intensity, your heart rate may actually be more like 40 to 60. So instead of it being 75, which is average, your average may run to 40 or 60. All right. So your heartbeat gets lower. Now that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Let's go back to cardiac output for a second. Remember, cardiac output was stroke volume, the number of contractions of the heart, times your heart rate. So if your stroke volume times 75, right, equals a cardiac output, now it's going to be stroke volume times 50, okay, equals your cardiac output. And here's the thing. What that does is this. Exercise increases your cardiac output, okay? It increases your cardiac output by basically making your heart more efficient. It's not that the stroke volume changes. It's that the heart rate changes. So you get the same benefits with less effort, okay? You get a better cardiac output, but with less effort. Your heart doesn't have to work very hard to give you a higher cardiac output. Are you following that? That's a really important idea. Your heart, instead of doing this, and I'm just making up a movement here, to give you your cardiac output, has to do this and give you a better output. So you can get more circulatory experience going on in your body, because remember, cardiac output is the volume that's being ejected from the heart every minute. And that volume is then going to go through the circulation that we talked about earlier: arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, veins, skeletal muscle pump, respiratory muscle pump, right back to the heart again. That cardiac output is what's going to be delivering oxygen to the tissues, right? So if we can increase that cardiac output, but increase it in a way that doesn't stress the heart, that's a win. That's a big win. And so your heart becomes healthier. It becomes more efficient. It is able to pump more blood per minute with less effort. That's huge. That's huge. Okay. Think about someone with high blood pressure. Okay. High blood pressure. So we can actually add this into our conversation here. Okay. We can add this into our conversation. When we are talking about pathology that affects the body adversely, think about high blood pressure. There's lots of reasons for high blood pressure, but one of the reasons for high blood pressure can be obesity. Okay, that's one to talk about in this context. It can be plaque buildups within the arterial system. Okay, it can be a weakened heart muscle even. Okay, all of these things can lead to high blood pressure. With high blood pressure, you've got pressure that is forcing the heart to work more strenuously. It's having to strain to create enough pressure to get the circulation of the blood. There's something that's creating a pressure that's pushing back on the heart, and the heart has to work extra hard to get the blood out of the heart and into the tissues. Okay, so anything that we can do to reduce that, anything that we can do to make the heart more efficient, okay, is beneficial for us. And like I said, increasing oxygen to the tissues is a really important thing. Now, here's another piece of that. When you do long-term training, and the type of training does matter, but let's just talk about long-term training at this moment as a piece of that. When you do long-term training can actually build up more capillaries in your muscle tissue. So if you're training your muscles a lot, your skeletal muscles a lot, there's an adaptive quality that has to occur to those muscles to allow them to continue doing the training that you're telling them to do. And one of those things is for them to build more capillaries into the muscle tissue to increase the amount of oxygen that can get into the muscle tissue. So you're increasing oxygen into the tissues by also creating more capillary beds through this training. And once again, that's a pretty awesome thing, okay? Since we started talking a little bit about obesity, since I kind of just mentioned that, and actually, before I do that, let me go back to another thing that I just mentioned. I mentioned plaques, okay, plaque buildups. If we're thinking about plaque buildups in your arteries, if we talk about arteriosclerosis, atherosclerosis is a type of arteriosclerosis, and it's the buildup of fats essentially in the blood vessels. Arteriosclerosis is a more generic term. It includes atherosclerosis, but it includes other types of plaques that could still also close up the arteries. So we'll use the term arteriosclerosis to be more broad. Any type of plaque buildup within the arteries is not good, because your arteries, if they're here, are allowing a certain amount of blood to pass through. But if the plaques are reducing the size of the lumen, the circumference of your arteries, that's preventing blood flow. And preventing blood flow to tissues is incredibly dangerous. If increasing blood flow is increasing life, decreasing blood flow to the tissues is increasing death. How's that? Okay, it's a very easy way to think about it. Increased oxygen to tissues, life. Decreased oxygen to tissues, death. Okay. So when we exercise on a regular basis, another one of the things that occurs because of the exercise, this increased blood flow leads to the arteries becoming wider because it helps reduce plaque buildup. It reduces plaque buildup, and it makes them more flexible. So if your arteries are stiff, that's another reason why you can have issues with cardiovascular disease, et cetera, is stiff arteries. Making them more flexible, making them more wider, allowing more blood flow. That's all excellent stuff. And that's what occurs with regular exercise. And you don't have to do crazy exercise to get that result. You really don't. And we'll talk more about that, as, like I said, as we get towards the end. Another thing is that exercise increases levels of nitric oxide. Okay. Nitric oxide is a molecule that relaxes smooth muscles. It does a lot of things, but one of the things it does is, if there's the muscle within the blood vessels, it relaxes that. That helps to widen those blood vessels. If they are being constricted, right, the nitric oxide helps to relax those blood vessels. So increasing nitric oxide, increasing blood flow, which helps with widening those arteries and reducing plaque buildups, increasing blood flow, therefore, once again, increasing oxygenation to the tissues. That's an amazing thing. Something that if you listen to any kind of science conversations, I read a lot of this stuff, so I'm hip to this. I don't know if most people are paying attention to this or not, but if you listen to a lot of health stuff, if you pay attention on any kind of news programs that talk about science, or you read any of the research journals or things like that, one of the huge conversations, and it's been a huge conversation for a long time, but it feels to me like it's becoming a bigger conversation now, if you will, and that is the mitochondria. Okay, the mitochondria. When you think about the cell, and I'm going to actually look up a picture here because I did not have one ready, but I think it would be kind of cool to look at a mitochondria. That's a pretty cool picture right there. We'll just do that one right there. Put that one into pictures. All right. So when you look at mitochondria, mitochondria are little organelles within the cell. Okay. So if we're going to go down into the cell, here you go. This is inside of a cell, and they've pretty much made everything else black and white or gray and allowed the mitochondria to be nice and big and in color. This would be the nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, and we got the mitochondria here. So mitochondria are little organelles within your cell. Big deal, you say. Well, the big deal is that mitochondria are responsible for the vast majority of your ATP production in your body. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. Big deal, they say again. Well, the big deal is that ATP is basically what keeps you alive. It's what's keeping you alive. Okay. One of the things I used to always tell my students is, if you died from suffocation, what is it that kills you? And they would all say, well, you're no longer breathing. I'm like, okay, great. Now go one step further. So why is that killing you? Because you don't have oxygen. Okay, that's great. That is true. You're dying. When you suffocate, you die from a lack of oxygen. But let's go deeper, because that's really not the reason why you die. Let's go even further. Why would a lack of oxygen kill you? And most students at this point, when I was teaching them, wouldn't be able to answer this. So I would have to then go in and say, well, let's talk about ATP production. With the mitochondria, what you need is oxygen. For the mitochondria to produce the quantity of ATP that they do, it requires oxygen. They cannot create ATP without the required oxygen. Now, there are other mechanisms that can create ATP inside the cell here, but that don't require oxygen, but the amount of ATP that they produce is minuscule. If we're talking about mitochondria, the amount comparatively is vast. Okay, so we're talking like 2 versus 34, so a huge difference in numbers. So the amount of ATP production that we can get from a mitochondria with oxygen is what truly is what's keeping us alive, because your cells use that ATP as energy to do everything that they do. So your cells are what create everything in your body. They keep you alive. You've got something like 70 trillion cells in your body, and it's these cells that make us who we are and that animate us and give us life, is the cells. If the cells aren't functioning, we die, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly. And without proper ATP production, that journey towards death accelerates very quickly. And if you cut off oxygen supply, your cells start to shut down. There's nothing the cells can do because they don't have any more energy. And so the cells shut down and die. And that is essentially what's killing you whenever you lose oxygen. Okay. I always found that fascinating, but that's me, and I'm a geek. So no problem there. I admit it. So that's one of these huge things. Now, coming back full circle with that, exercise increases the number of mitochondria. When you exercise, do regular exercise, long-term exercise, your body increases the number of mitochondria available. That means that we're increasing the possibility of creating more ATP. One of the reasons why we have more energy when we exercise, it goes all the way back to the cell and increasing the number of those mitochondria, which are then increasing the number of ATP, which then increases the potential for energy in our body. And so, nitric oxide, changing the width of the arteries, changing the flexibility of the arteries, reducing plaque buildup, increasing mitochondrial activity and numbers. Okay, all of these things are things that we're getting from exercise. So I think I'm making a pretty good case for this so far, but let's go into something else. Let's shift gears just a little bit and look at this from another perspective. Okay. And that is obesity. So obesity in our country, and once again, if you've been following anything that I've been saying or doing, whether it's on Facebook or it is here on the flip side, you've been following my information talking about the chronic disease epidemic in the United States. Chronic disease in the United States is way out of control. Like we're talking like 50 to 60% of the population has some type of chronic disease. Those are insane numbers. Those are numbers that will cripple the country. They already are crippling the country, but they will cripple the country if they continue like they are, which is why this is such an important topic for us to discuss as a nation. And obesity is one of these things. Obesity is a driver towards chronic disease problems. When we talk about heart problems and cardiovascular problems and metabolic issues and type 2 diabetes and all of these types of things, obesity is one of the things at the core of what we're talking about. The numbers of obese Americans is staggering. It's mind-blowing. I recently saw an image, and I don't have it available, and I'm not going to look for it right now, but an image of the world, okay, United States and all the different continents, and it was graphically showing with color gradations the numbers of obese people in the world. And going towards the red color would be more and more and more obese. Going towards, like, I think it was a blue color was less and less obese. The United States was almost entirely like totally red. Whereas other countries, you had very small patches maybe of lighter shades of red, but nothing like America, nothing. So think about what we're doing to the citizens of our country, what we're doing. We're doing it to ourselves. Yes, I get this. Many people I've had conversations with, and they're like, what about self-responsibility? You don't have to eat that McDonald's. You don't have to drink that soda. You don't have to sit on the couch and not exercise and watch TV. You are 100% correct. Choice that we make from ourselves is incredibly important. And yes, we can't make light of that. However, we've got a lot of factors that lead to this. Okay, a lot of factors that build up a momentum towards that, and those are things that we can control. We can control the quantity of education that we give our kids and the American citizens regarding the dangers of this, that, and the other. I don't think we do a good enough job with that. We can change our medical system, which is not a healthcare system, it's a sick care system. We can change our medical system into a better healthcare model by helping get some of the control from the health insurance companies out of that. You would think, and here's something that has never made sense, that the health insurance companies would be driving this. They would be driving this because if you're healthier, it's less money for them to have to pay. But there's something nefarious going on within that whole system because the pharmaceutical companies, obviously they have a predilection towards disease and chronic disease and problems. If you have more chronic diseases, if you have more health issues, they make money hand over fist all the time. And so getting you healthy, even though that's kind of what they want you to believe because, hey, this drug product makes you healthy. Take this. Of course, the side effects are death, impotency, and whatever else, right? But their goal cannot be to make you healthy. It can't, because it's a business model that hurts them. Okay. It destroys them. It makes them not necessary. If everybody were to become really healthy, it makes them less necessary. So it's not a business model for them. It is for health insurance companies, at least from my mind. Maybe someone has a perspective they could give me for that, because it doesn't make any sense. But there's obviously a marriage going on here in the medical system with all of this. The insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies are the two biggest driving factors to what happens in our medical model, which is why it is not a healthcare model. It's a sick care model. I'm not saying we should get rid of it. I'm not saying that it's entirely bad. What I'm saying is we have to see it for what it is. It's not healthcare, it's sick care. And as such, we need to treat it with that respect. In other words, respect it as sick care. Absolutely. If I'm in a situation where I can't seem to get myself out of it through all the natural means that I would normally do, by all means, help me with medicine. Absolutely. I have no problem with that. I am not anti-medicine at all. I'm anti-medicine when it's being used in the context of healthcare. It's not health. Okay. It's not health whatsoever. And that's where we need to really reframe things. So I'll get off my soapbox and continue back on the path that I was. And that was talking about things like obesity. So let's talk about obesity. Okay. Why, number one, why is obesity? And let me even change my phrasing on that. Let's change the phrasing and say, why is gaining excess weight? Okay. You don't have to be obese clinically. Let's say adding excess weight. Why is adding excess weight harmful? Why is it harmful? Well, number one, let's rephrase that and say, instead of excess weight, let's say excess fat as weight. If I say that if I'm a bodybuilder and I'm, what just happened there? My volume looked like it was down. Let's hope that I'm not recording this whole thing and there's no volume. I'll have to go back and do the whole thing over again. But if I am a bodybuilder and I am, let's say, 220 pounds of muscle, and my body fat, even on my off cycle, is at, let's say, 12%, maybe 15%. Okay, let's just say that that's the case. But now let's say that I'm 220 pounds and my body fat is at 30%. That's a radical difference. It's a radical difference. This is why BMI, which is what a lot of companies use as a weight estimate, is a height weight chart that registers whether or not you're too heavy or not. That's one of the reasons why BMI is useless. If you are above the weight for your height, but your body fat's down here, then that's not unhealthy. In fact, you're probably very, very, very healthy. But if your body fat is up here, then that changes that perspective completely. So let's say excess fat weight. You've gained excess fat weight. So remember, fat cells are cells. You have fat cells in you right now, even if you're not overweight, okay? Even the thinnest person has fat cells. Fat cells are necessary. They are vitally important aspects of your being, okay? You have to have a certain number of fat cells to live, okay? You have to have that. Fat cells are important in our body. However, remember, they are a cell and they have to be fed oxygen, and wastes have to be taken away, just like all the other cells that we talked about before. So if you increase your fat content, your body has to increase the blood vessels length. Vascularity has to increase to feed that increased number of fat cells. So let's say you went from 160 and you put on 20 pounds of fat, okay? You sat around and watched TV and ate crap food and whatever, and you gained 20 pounds of fat. That 20 pounds of fat is going to require new blood vessels to be created by the body to spread out amongst those fat cells and feed the fat cells. Now let's say you put on 50 pounds, 100 pounds of extra fat. Once again, those blood vessels have to increase in length and spread out throughout the fat cells to feed the fat cells. So I don't remember the actual number of miles of blood vessels we have in the body. It's actually miles. If you had, and I'm just playing with numbers here, let's say you had 50 miles of blood vessels in your body, and that was at a healthy weight. And now you put on 100 pounds of excess fat. And now instead of having 50 miles of blood vessels, now you have 100 miles of blood vessels. Okay. Once again, these numbers are just made up. Okay. But just to give you an idea, your body has to increase the amount of blood vessels, which increases the length of blood vessels. Does that make sense? Now let's go back to the heart. Remember, the heart has to contract to create enough blood pressure coming out to get the blood all the way down to those capillary levels. And then your body has to then also contract in different ways to get the blood back. The longer that blood vessel length gets, it increases resistance. Okay, it increases resistance. So this blood vessel is this long, the resistance from here to here is XYZ, it's not as much. But if we increase that vessel length, the resistance is also increasing at the same time. So if this was a resistance of X, this was X times whatever, this is X times more, this is X times more. And so the longer those blood vessel length becomes, the greater the resistance on the heart, meaning that the heart has to work harder and harder and harder to get the blood to those areas that are further and further and further and further out there. Okay. Think about driving a car. If I have to go take a package, okay, I'm a UPS driver, and I have to take a package from the warehouse to a home that is, across the street. I used like no gas, okay, almost nothing. Now I have to take that package to one that's 5 miles away. I'm using more gas. If I have to then take it, 200 miles away, it takes a lot. In fact, I have to stop and I have to refuel because to even get there, right? Now think about it from the heart's perspective. The heart is contracting and trying to get blood to these tissues. The further it has to try to get that, the stronger and the more vigorously it's going to have to work to try and create that flow to get there. That's the resistance. So one of the big things that happens with someone who's obese, it's putting stress on that cardiovascular system as the whole system, because it is affecting, for one, your heart's ability to push that blood all the way out to those tissues and then to get that blood all the way back to the heart. Okay. One other thing, in addition to that, we talked about those valves. The blood pushes through those valves up towards the heart, and then the valves collapse down and the blood stops, and then it keeps going, right? We talked about that. If you've ever heard of varicose veins, varicose veins occur when those valves fail and the veins become weak and distorted, and that affects circulation. It affects your body's blood clotting, and it creates a hazard. One of the big factors for creating varicose veins is obesity. The more weight you have pressing down on the system, the harder it is for that blood to go up against that pressure. And that creates weakened valves and it creates varicose veins. And that's one of many things that occurs, but that's one of the things that happens. So, you're creating damage to blood vessel valves, you're creating damage to the heart just based on every so many pounds of fat weight that you put on is actually putting stress back onto that system. That probably makes a lot of sense to most people. Here's a twist to that. Let's look at, where'd it go? Here it is. Something that you may not know. First time I found out about this was, I don't know, probably 18 to 20 years ago, maybe more, as far as the details. But I was like, wow, I didn't know all that. So let's talk about fat as a cell. Like we talked about it as a cell. So the yellow here in the middle, this is adipose tissue, which would be fat tissue. So these are fat cells. And what is happening in this image, what we're seeing here is we're seeing hormones and just chemical products. Let's just call it that, as opposed to just saying all hormones, because not everything that comes out of this is a hormone. Some are enzymes, etc. Your fat cells, if you were to ask someone who has more fat than they want, and there's a lot of people that you could probably ask like that, they would say, if you said, what's the function of fat tissue? What is its purpose? They would just say it's to make you ugly, and there's no real reason that fat tissue should exist, basically, in their mind, because they just want to get rid of all of it. If they could get down to zero fat, they'd be like, yay. Fat cells have a purpose, right? I mean, your body doesn't create it just to make you angry. Your body doesn't create it just to make you look bad in your bathing suit. Your body creates fat cells because fat cells have a purpose. Fat cells have a purpose. And so with fat cells, they have a lot of things that they release. Your fat cells have an endocrine function, meaning they can release hormones. They release enzymes. They release lots of products into your blood system. And when you have normal amounts of fat cells, there's actually a lot of good that comes from fat cells, right? So it's not, they have a function, okay? So let's go through each of these. Leptin. If you look at leptin right there at the top here, we'll go clockwise. So we'll start here at leptin and we'll go around and we'll look at these. Normal levels of leptin actually help you with appetite control. Isn't that interesting? Normal levels of fat cells actually produce a hormone called leptin that actually helps you with appetite control. But here's the thing. When you increase the amount of leptin being produced, which of course is going to be increased when the number of fat cells are increased, it actually leads to less appetite control. Interesting. Normal levels with normal amounts of fat cells helps with appetite control. But as you start to build up more and more and more fat cells and the amount of leptin is increased, it actually reduces your ability to control your appetite. Go figure, right? That next one there, adiponectin, okay? I kind of like the way that one sounds. It actually helps with insulin sensitivity, okay? Now remember, insulin is your hormone released from the pancreas that takes blood sugar out of the blood circulation and puts it into the cells for usage or storage, okay? And it's insulin issues that lead to diabetes type 1 and even with diabetes type 2. So adiponectin actually helps with insulin sensitivity, but due to the increased inflammation that occurs when you start to become less and less healthy and you start to become more and more obese, okay, the adiponectin gets reduced and therefore it leads to problems with insulin sensitivity. So once again, adiponectin, something that in a normal body weight with normal fat cells would help you with insulin sensitivity, actually is going to have a problem with insulin sensitivity when you get more and more fat cells. That next one is resistin. And this one actually increases of this lead to insulin resistance. So we talked about that decreased insulin sensitivity. Add to that increased insulin resistance with this, okay? And now we're starting to see where this can lead to obesity, and diabetes are so, linked, right? Resistant is also pro-inflammatory, so we're creating more inflammation. Interleukins, also pro-inflammatory, more inflammation here. Tumor necrosis factor, that one right off the bat, everyone goes, ooh, tumor necrosis factor. That doesn't sound good. You're right. Well, it's also pro-inflammatory, okay? And increased levels of this are linked to cardiovascular issues, type 2 diabetes directly, and even certain cancers, which kind of gives you that tumor idea there. Estrogen and estrogens, when a person has excess fat, when they start to become obese, in women, you start to see menstrual irregularities, you start to see early menopause, you might see breast and uterine cancers increasing. And in men, increases, there's a enzyme called aromatase, and the increases in estrogen lead to an increase in this enzyme called aromatase, which leads to testosterone converting into estrogen. Okay, this aromatase enzyme converts testosterone into estrogen. And of course, this is going to lead in men, if you have this big increase in estrogen, sexual dysfunction, mood changes, fatty breast tissue for men, the man boobs, and metabolic issues, which is a broad category. So this can be really bad. Apelin or apelin, I've never been quite sure exactly how to pronounce that one. Normal levels could help with cardiovascular function, but increased levels of apelin or apelin goes back to this idea of insulin resistance. So here's another one. So now we got 3 different things at least here that are affecting insulin issues. And that last one, visfatin, once again, also, normalizing glucose levels in a normal situation, but when increased, adds to insulin resistance. So you've got lots of problems here. So I'm going to get out of that real quick here. There we go. So, normal weights, normal levels of body fat, you have product being released by the fat cells that has benefits. Okay, most of it has benefits. Okay, and that's not even mentioning the fact that fat cells are where we store fat, right? When you eat anything in excess, okay, so let's understand that it's not a matter of eating too much fat. Too much fat does not make you fat. If you think that or you thought that, get that out of your head, because it's not true at all, and there's no science to support that whatsoever. Fat does not make you fat. Anything in excess calorically can get converted into fat. So too much protein, too much fat, too much carbohydrate, any of that can be converted into fat. So excess caloric intake is what converts into fat. Fat storage as a primary concept is not a bad thing. What is bad is when the fat becomes more and more and more and more. And now we become chronically obese and we have lots of problems, okay? So exercise, regular exercise, what does that do for that? Well, of course, for one, it can lead to fat reduction, okay? Now, those who are towards the more chronically obese would say, hey, it's easy for you to say, and it's not so easy to exercise and lose weight. You are 100% correct, 100% correct. I am not saying that. It's very difficult. Much easier to keep yourself from getting there than it is to take yourself back once you get there. Okay, so there's a good lesson in that for people who are not there yet. You don't want to get yourself there. You get yourself there and it's very difficult to get yourself back. There are lots of ways to do it and you can certainly do it, but it takes lots of work and lots of willpower. I don't like willpower as an idea, but to get you back there. So definitely want to get it stop it before it becomes that thing. Once you become that, though, yes, exercise is necessary to lose the weight, although diet is the primary thing. Exercise is important, and exercise helps with a bunch of other things. It helps with the utilization of sugar in your body. So those who have diabetes, exercise is an important factor because it helps with the utilization of sugar in your body. Also, exercise helps increase muscle mass. If I'm driving a vehicle with a really large engine, it's going to consume a lot of gas to get me from point A to point B. If I'm doing one with a much smaller, more efficient engine, I may be able to do that same thing with less, okay? When we build up bigger, stronger, more efficient muscle tissue, our metabolism actually increases and we are able to be more efficient with energy usage and production. And so we have a stronger, more efficient engine for burning off fuel, for burning off fat. A person with better, healthier muscle mass, after their exercise is burning calories for a very long time. Someone without that still burns calories, but once again, with that more muscle mass, you burn calories for a much longer time period. So exercise is increasing the efficiency of your body, okay? It's decreasing your fat storages. It's increasing your glucose usage ability in your body. And so, yes, even once you get to that point, you do need to exercise. Go backwards. Diet is the most important thing, but the exercise is incredibly important as well. All right. All right. I think we made some good progress there. So let's talk in this last little section here. Let's talk a little bit about exercise itself. Okay. Now, I don't know if any of you know of a book that is, it's huge right now. It's huge. I have not finished reading it at this point, but I am mostly through it. And I think it's a great book. It's called Atomic Habits. The author's name is James Clear, and the book is called Atomic Habits. And I wrote a couple of quotes down that I wanted to share with you that I thought were really good. You know, there's an old expression that says there's nothing new in this world, that everything's kind of recycled, right? But it's sometimes when something's recycled a certain way, it strikes you in a way that it didn't before, right? So there's something that's beneficial about that recycling of information, that it can reach someone that it couldn't have reached before the way it was previously. It can reach you. So one of the quotes is, "You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." Think about that. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And what that's saying is, making goals for exercise or weight loss, since we're talking about that, is important. I think it's important. You should spend a moment to sit down and write down, what are your goals? What do you want to do? You know, I have a goal of exercising this many times. I have a goal of losing this much weight. I have a goal of competing in this competition or whatever. Those are your goals. I think that's really important. And so you have to have your goals, but you don't rise to your goals. You don't put down there, I plan on, doing this bodybuilding competition 1 year from now. So that's my goal. So now that you put that on paper, doesn't then say, okay, well, now I'm just going to start exercising all the time. That's good to have that goal, but it's your systems that are in place that are going to help you reach your goals, and or it's your lack of systems that mean you're not going to reach your goals. Does that make sense? And so it's the systems that you put in place to get to those goals that are the most important part. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So if your systems are really good, you'll reach your goals. If your systems are really bad, you won't reach your goals. So that's a really important thing. And I thought that was brilliantly said. It's something that I've heard before in other ways before in the past, but I like the way it was said. Decide the type of person you want to be, and then you prove it to yourself with small wins. I love that. I absolutely love that. Decide the type of person you want to be. That's the first part. And then you prove it to yourself with small wins. You don't have to win the whole race at one goal. You don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to achieve or accomplish all of your goals tomorrow. It's those small victories that prove to yourself, I can do this. I can absolutely do this. And it's the small wins that add up. They add up. Okay. The last quote that I have by him is, give yourself permission to reduce the scope, but stick to the schedule. This is my most important one. Give yourself permission to reduce the scope, but stick to the schedule. Reduce the scope, but stick to the schedule. I love that. I absolutely love that. Okay. Because what it's telling you is this. Let's say you have decided to work out 3 days a week. Okay. That's reasonable, right? It's reasonable. But you don't have to start with that. You could say one time a week. Okay. Start off with one. Like I said, small wins, right? Small wins. So if you make a goal of working out 3 times a week, right? And you look at your schedule and you say, okay, here's where I have to work. Here's where I have to do errands that I can't avoid. Here's where I have to do this with my kids or my spouse or whatever. But this space right here is empty 3 days a week. I'm going to put in there a commitment to work out, whether it's go to the gym or it's do something at the home or whatever, right? Then you start setting up your systems around that. How do you make sure that you do that? Well, you block out the time, you set up alarms, you let other people around you know that this is your time for that. You turn off your phone at that point. You don't answer emails, whatever it is. You set up your habits, your schedules around that. Now, I'm not the expert in that. Okay. James Clear is an expert of that. Okay. But that's what you do, right? Now, if something does get in the way, I set this time aside and this was clear that I could do this, but suddenly there's this, now I've got to take my dog to the vet or whatever, right? And so give yourself permission to reduce the scope, but stick to the schedule. So you were going to work out, for an hour at the gym, okay? But now you've got this problem, right? And it's going to take you 30, 40 minutes. It's going to take it out of your schedule and you're not going to be able to do that. So instead of saying, well, if I can't do it the way that I wanted to do it, if I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it. That is stinking thinking. That's the kind of thing that messes you up. Okay. That's where you give yourself permission to reduce the scope, but stick to the schedule. So go to the gym, run in, do 20 minutes on the treadmill, whatever, do 10 minutes on the bike, and then 1 set of curls. Seriously, that's it. But that's not really doing anything. Yeah, it is. Not only is it still doing something physiologically for you, more importantly, it's doing something here. It's keeping you honest to your schedule. And it's giving yourself a break by saying, I'm not going to condemn myself because I couldn't finish everything. What I'm going to do is embrace the fact that shit happens, okay? It got tough and I couldn't stick to my schedule exactly, but I still did something. I feel good now. I feel good about that. I feel good that I still did something, okay? That's really important. That's really, really, really important. I think that's so vital. We beat ourselves up. If we can't do it perfectly, we won't do it at all. That's just ridiculous, okay? I'll give you an example. In my office, when there's a downtime in the office, oftentimes there's a really nice plush carpet in my office. And so there's a downtime where there's nobody coming in for a little bit. I'll go over there on that carpet and I'll jog in place. And it may sound silly, but I may do 10 minutes of jogging in place. And as I'm jogging in place, I'm doing my arms like this, and I may look ridiculous. Okay. But number one, no one can see me. And number two, I'm getting in something so that by the end of the day, if I didn't get whatever else I wanted, I got something. I got something in there. I moved my body. I got circulation going. I worked those skeletal muscle pumps in my legs, right? I increased circulation. And I told myself that it was important for me to do this. It was important for me to step up and do something. Okay. In the kitchen at home, I've been cooking dinner. I do a lot of cooking dinner for the family. And so I'm cooking dinner, and there's a point there where something has to simmer for a while or whatever. I jog in place. Okay. I may actually hold on to the edge of the counter and do some push-ups on the counter. Okay. Is this the best thing I can do? No, it's not. Is it going to get me to bigger goals that I'm having? Probably not. But it is still helping me mentally to know that exercise is important, and I'm going to try to find little ways to get it in. Whatever little ways that I can find to get something into my day. Okay. And then I'm going to try to still go back to my schedule of going to the gym and doing whatever. Right. And so that's an important thing. And I think it's a very, very valuable lesson. I think it's probably one of the most valuable lessons you can get. So start small. I always taught my students, since I talked about being a teacher, let's go into that. How do you eat an elephant? And they would look at me with Google eyes and say, what do you mean? How do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. When you see something very big in front of you, like an elephant, and you think there's no way I can handle this, I can't eat an elephant. But if you took one bite at a time, eventually you would get the job done. The fact, or the point being, that when something seems overwhelming, break it down into small components so that you can look at it from that perspective and not this perspective, and handle it piece by piece. So even with your exercise, if all you did was, after you got out of the shower in the morning, you did 10 push-ups and that's it, good. Do it every single day. Do it every single day. Get out of the shower after you've, whatever, or do it before the shower. Okay. My energy comes after the shower. That's the reason I say that. But whatever works, do 10 push-ups. Okay. Do planks every day. Do a plank for 1 minute, whatever. Okay. Do a plank for 1 minute. Get yourself a set of dumbbells. Do 20 reps of bicep curls every other day. Okay. Whatever. Anything like that. Okay. Do something, find something, even if it seems like it's a nothing, but do it repetitively, because the formation of those habits is what will drive you to do bigger and better habits. That is probably more important than any conversation of, well, what should I do for exercise? What I just said, that's what you should be doing. It's doing some type of exercise program that you're going to do. Okay. The question was always with patients or clients was, well, what's the best exercise that I can do? My answer was always a frustrating one for people, because it was always, the best exercise is the one you're going to do. And once again, they'd be like, what do you mean? But the best exercise is the one you're going to do. If I were to tell you that the best exercise was XYZ, and you said, but I hate that. Okay. Riding a stationary bike. I can't stand riding a stationary bike. Hate it. Hate it, hate it, hate it. No matter how good a shape I've ever been in, my thighs burn like crazy doing the stationary bike, which means I should probably keep doing it because there's something there I need, right? But I hate it. Walking on a treadmill or running on a treadmill, I can do that forever and get my heart rate up into a nice level and sustain it for a long period of time, so I can get more out of it. So I enjoy that. That's good. Enjoy maybe a big word for that, but I can do it, right? I can do it really well. So if it's something that you're not going to do, why do it? Even if it's the best exercise there is, why would you do that? One of the best exercises I think ever existed was a Versa climber. You can't find those very often anymore. They're very difficult to find. It's handles and foot pedals, and you climbed like that. Very difficult. It was hard for me to do, but I enjoyed it. Excellent all over body cardiovascular type training. You can't find them as much anymore, but it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do. And if I told you had to do that for, an hour and a half every day, you're probably not going to do it. So don't do that. Find the exercise that you can do and then do it repetitively. Okay. Will you walk your dog for, 10 minutes every day? Good. Okay. Excellent. That's good. Okay. Is that everything that you should be doing? No, it's not. And there are other things that would help you. But if you're doing that, that's excellent. That's a good start. Okay. Now maybe we can add one little thing into that, add the push-ups in the morning or whatever. Right. But the first and the most important thing is to pick something that you know that you can do, so that you can do it repetitively on a regular basis. If you look into exercise guidelines, there's lots of variations. It's usually something around, like 2 hours or 2.5 hours every week of like moderate exercise, moderate intensity exercise, 2 to 2.5 hours every week. And then coupled with some type of weight training, because weight training and cardiovascular training are two different types of things, and they're both very important. They give your body different things. So finding yourself little things that you can do. If you looked at 2.5 hours of exercise, that's going to be 20 to 30 minutes every day is what that's going to be. So maybe you feel right now that you can't do that. Maybe you put that into the schedule, right? But you give yourself permission to reduce the scope and not the schedule. Stick to the schedule. If you can't do 30 minutes every day and you only get in 10 minutes, no big deal. Okay. Relish in the fact that you got that accomplished and then move on from there. Okay. So when it comes to specific exercise, I'm not going to get in here and start talking about, CrossFit or any types of things like that. I'm not going to do that right now. We may do that at some other point, but that's not the point for today. The point for today was to try to show you or illustrate to you the physiological importance for exercise in your body, how anatomically and physiologically your body needs this exercise and what it does for your body, making you a healthier, stronger individual. And that's the important part. And then that last part, hopefully to tell you that it doesn't take a mountain. You can climb a small hill instead of a mountain. You do it in small increments. Give yourself wins, okay? That decide the type of person you want to be, and then prove it to yourself with small wins. So important, so important. That's what motivates you, okay? So, all right. I think we got through a lot of good stuff there. I hope this was an interesting perspective for you. The way that we did that, it wasn't too boring for you. I geek out on this stuff like crazy. I love teaching, and I get a lot out of understanding the reasons for things. That's kind of the way my brain works. If someone says I should do something, I go, okay, great, but why? And that frustrates the hell out of some people because I want to know why. I like to know why. And so knowing why in the body this is important helps motivate me towards exercise. Hopefully that helps give you some motivation as well. So we'll wrap up. We'll wrap up for this episode of The Flip Side. Remember, at the beginning and at the end of this video, there is information for following this fun on Spotify, Rumble, YouTube, my Facebook channel. Check out those different sites and follow along. I would appreciate that. And even more, I would appreciate other things. Number one, send me something through email. Ask me some questions. I'd love to put that onto the air. And the other thing is share. Follow along, excellent, but also share it on your Facebook, share it to your friends. If you found it valuable, let them know the information as well. I appreciate it, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.